Europe's deep past begins not with kingdoms or empires, but with small groups of early humans who wandered across vast plains, following herds and shifting seasons, long before maps or borders existed. These early settlers left behind bones, primitive tools, and fragments of cave art that silently testify to their struggles and creativity. In these distant ages, survival demanded cooperation, adaptation, and innovation, the same qualities that would shape European civilization thousands of years later. As the Ice Age gradually loosened its grip, Europe's geography transformed dramatically. Glaciers melted, coastlines shifted, rivers carved new paths, and fertile lands emerged where frozen tundra once stretched endlessly. Into these transformed landscapes came new waves of people, bringing not only physical presence, but also language, culture, and ideas. This era was defined by movement and mixing, a slow weaving of human threads that would eventually become the tapestry of Europe. One of the profound developments of early Europe was the emergence of complex stone tools and rudimentary forms of communication. Human groups began forming larger communities, sharing hunting strategies, spiritual beliefs, and social bonds. With every generation, they learned more about the land, its plants, its animals, its cycles, and this knowledge became foundational for the advancements that would follow. Among the oldest cultural treasures of Europe are its cave paintings, found in places like Lascaux and Altamira. These artworks depict animals, hunts, and symbolic forms that hint at early rituals or early attempts to record history. Though created tens of thousands of years ago, they reveal that early Europeans possessed imagination, intention, and a desire to express meanings beyond everyday survival. Over time, human settlements became more permanent. With warming climates came more reliable food sources, leading to less wandering and more long-term habitation. Shelters grew sturdier, communities developed structured roles, and early forms of leadership emerged. These changes mark Europe's slow transition from nomadic bands to proto-societies. With sedentary living came the experimentation with cultivation. The early stages of farming in Europe were inspired by migrant groups from the Near East who carried seeds, animals, and agricultural knowledge with them. This exchange brought wheat, barley, sheep, and goats to European soil, revolutionizing life. Food production meant larger populations, steadier growth, and the dawn of early villages. Agriculture did not only reshape diets, but also proved transformative for social organization. As families tended fields and raised animals, they created surplus food, an idea previously impossible. Surplus gave rise to trade, specialization, and social hierarchies. Some groups became farmers, others potters, toolmakers, or traders. The first sparks of economic structure began to ignite. Another significant shift in early European civilization was the introduction of pottery, which allowed for storage of grains, liquids, and perishables. Pottery marked a leap in domestic life, enabling households to plan for seasons and survive harsh winters with preserved food. Designs and styles became cultural identifiers, linking distant tribes through shared techniques or unique patterns. Villages slowly grew into complex communities as families expanded and alliances formed. Paths between settlements evolved into trade routes, enabling exchanges not only of goods, but also ideas. Through such exchanges, knowledge spread rapidly: stoneworking methods, domestication techniques, spiritual beliefs, and early forms of artistic expression. Europe's earliest societies also developed ceremonial practices. Burial sites reveal ritual objects, ornaments, and carefully arranged remains, indicating that early Europeans believed in life after death or spiritual continuity. These rituals offered continuity, connected families across generations, and helped shape early moral frameworks. As populations grew, the management of land, water, and resources became crucial. Communities needed cooperation and rules, leading to the earliest forms of governance. Leadership roles emerged, sometimes based on experience, strength, or spiritual authority. These leaders helped maintain peace, organize labor, and guide group decisions. The late Neolithic period saw the construction of monumental structures that still mystify historians. Sites like Stonehenge, Karnak, and various megalithic tombs reveal sophisticated engineering knowledge and social coordination. Building such structures required not only collective labor, but also planning, astronomical observations, and spiritual conviction. These monuments underscore the growing intellectual and organizational capabilities of early Europeans. They were no longer mere survivalists. They were becoming architects, astronomers, and cultural innovators. Their knowledge of seasons and celestial events helped shape agricultural cycles, religious ceremonies, and early calendars. As communities expanded, conflict became inevitable. Competition for land, water, and trade routes created tensions between groups. This period saw the development of early weapons and defensive structures. But conflicts also pushed societies to improve strategies, form alliances, and develop more sophisticated systems of governance. During this era, metallurgy emerged as one of the most transformative technologies. The shift from stone to metal tools marked a technological revolution. Copper, bronze, and later iron improved farming, warfare, and craftsmanship. Metallurgists became highly respected specialists, and metal goods became valuable trade commodities. Bronze tools and weapons elevated warfare and agriculture alike. Settlements fortified their boundaries, and leaders equipped warriors with improved weaponry. This technological edge allowed some groups to expand influence and control territories, marking the early foundations of European political expansion. Trade networks flourished across the continent as societies recognized the value of exchanging materials unavailable in their own lands. Amber from the Baltic, tin from Britain, and obsidian from the Mediterranean moved across long distances. These networks not only spread goods, but interconnected cultures in unprecedented ways. Maritime skills improved alongside trade. Early boats and ships allowed coastal communities to venture across seas, linking islands and distant mainland regions. These waterways became essential trade corridors, shaping economic and cultural development for millennia to come. Writing had not yet reached Europe at this time, but symbolic communication became increasingly sophisticated. Carvings, pottery patterns, and ritual objects communicated identity and status. Over time, these visual expressions became integral parts of social and cultural life. The appearance of early towns marked a turning point in Europe's urban development. These centers supported markets, workshops, ceremonial sites, and administrative functions. Though modest compared to later cities, they represented the early seeds of European urbanization. Early European communities also developed agricultural innovations to maximize land use. Techniques such as irrigation channels, crop rotation, and animal-drawn plows began to enhance productivity. These innovations helped stabilize food supplies and sustain growing populations. Social hierarchies grew more pronounced as wealth accumulated. Elites controlled valuable land, trade goods, and religious authority. Such structures influenced political organization and shaped cultural customs for centuries to come. Religious beliefs during this era revolved around nature, ancestors, and celestial cycles. Rituals honored the sun, moon, animals, and fertility, reflecting dependence on the natural world. These early spiritual systems laid foundations for later mythologies and religious traditions. The arrival of Indo-European speaking peoples dramatically influenced Europe's linguistic and cultural landscape. These groups migrated across vast regions, bringing new languages, technologies, and social structures. Their influence can still be traced in many modern European languages. These Indo-European groups often had advanced warfare strategies, horse domestication, and metal weaponry, giving them dominance in many regions. Their expansion reshaped population distributions, and contributed to the formation of new tribal identities. The use of horses and wheeled vehicles revolutionized mobility. Carts and wagons allowed for transport of goods over long distances, expanding trade networks and enabling more efficient farming and construction. Cultural blending occurred as Indo-European newcomers mixed with indigenous populations. Over centuries, these interactions formed regional identities that became the roots of future European ethnic and cultural groups. Myth-making flourished during this age, with oral traditions passing stories about gods, ancestors, and heroic deeds. These myths offered explanations for natural events and reinforced social values. Though unwritten, they shaped cultural consciousness and would later influence European literature. Early Europeans developed clothing and textiles using wool, flax, and animal hides. Weaving techniques evolved, producing fabrics that offered warmth and comfort in varying climates. Clothing also became a marker of identity, status, and craftsmanship. Housing structures improved from simple huts to more sophisticated homes built with wood, clay, and stone. Some settlements constructed multi-room houses, storage facilities, and communal spaces, revealing early architectural developments. As communities grew more interconnected, conflicts escalated in scale. Defensive innovations, walls, ditches, and fortified hilltop settlements became increasingly common. These early strongholds became centers of power and security. The Bronze Age societies of Europe became increasingly complex in governance, economy, and culture. Large burial mounds and rich grave goods indicate the rise of powerful elites who maintained political and religious authority. Trade routes stretched across Europe, connecting the Atlantic to the Mediterranean and the North Sea to the Black Sea. Along these routes, merchants carried not only metals and goods, but seeds of cultural exchange that would shape the continent's evolution. In the Mediterranean region, early civilizations like the Minoans and Mycenaeans emerged, deeply influencing southern Europe. Their advanced shipbuilding, writing systems, and artistic expressions introduced entirely new cultural dimensions to the continent. The Minoans, known for their vibrant frescoes and palace complexes, showcased an early example of urban planning. Their maritime dominance enabled extensive trade networks that linked them to the broader European world. The collapse of the Minoans and Mycenaeans opened opportunities for new cultural groups, leading to shifts in power and trade. These fluctuations in Mediterranean civilizations would later influence the rise of classical Greece, which profoundly shaped Europe. Northern and Western Europe developed more slowly but steadily. Their societies remained largely tribal, yet they built impressive wooden fortifications and longhouses that reflected their environment and lifestyle. These tribes preserved unique traditions and languages that differed from Mediterranean influences. The Iron Age marked another leap forward, as iron tools and weapons became widespread. Iron was more abundant than copper and tin, making it accessible to more communities. This increased productivity, strengthened armies, and fueled population growth. Iron Age Europeans built larger settlements and improved agricultural efficiency. Better plows, axes, and sickles enabled them to cultivate more land, clearing forests and shaping Europe's landscape into recognizable forms. Tribal confederations emerged, leading to the early foundations of regional powers. These confederations often fought for territory, but also negotiated alliances, setting the stage for political organization in future centuries. Celtic cultures spread widely across Europe during this period, known for their intricate art, powerful warriors, and extensive trade networks. The Celts played a major role in shaping Europe's pre-Roman cultural identity. Celtic societies emphasized oral tradition, spiritual rituals, and craftsmanship. Their metalwork, jewelry, and decorated weaponry exhibit exceptional skill and aesthetic sensibility. Their cultural influence extended from Iberia to the British Isles to Central Europe. Across the continent, languages diversified, reflecting regional isolation and cultural identity. These linguistic families would later form the basis of modern European languages, creating the complex linguistic map seen today. The religious systems of Iron Age Europe included druids, shamans, and nature-based deities. Rituals often took place in forests, rivers, or sacred sites. These beliefs shaped festivals, moral codes, and social norms. Europe's early economic systems became increasingly sophisticated. Weaving, metalworking, pottery, trade, and farming formed interdependent networks that supported stable communities. Markets and trade centers played vital roles in distributing goods. Population density increased steadily, with settlements expanding into towns. These growing communities required new social structures, early legal codes, and organized decision-making processes. Landscape modification became more intense during this era. Forests were cleared for agriculture, rivers were diverted, and land boundaries were established. These changes signaled humanity's increasing control over nature. Environmental challenges such as harsh winters, famine, disease, and resource scarcity forced communities to innovate or migrate. These pressures shaped the adaptive resilience that would characterize European civilization. The stage was set for the rise of advanced European cultures that would soon interact with and be transformed by the classical civilizations of Greece and Rome. Europe was no longer a land of scattered tribes, but a diverse, dynamic continent filled with evolving societies. Europe's early foundations, agriculture, metallurgy, trade, governance, ritual, and art formed the pillars on which later civilizations would build. As the continent prepared to enter the classical age, these ancient elements remained deeply rooted in European identity. The pre-classical period closed with societies poised for profound change. Ideas and technologies flowed from the Mediterranean northward, while northern traditions influenced the south. The stage was set for an explosion of cultural, political, and intellectual developments. This era marked the beginning of Europe becoming an interconnected cultural sphere, even before written history fully captured its story. The slow, steady progress of countless generations created fertile ground for future civilizations to flourish. By the time writing would reach many regions of Europe, the continent already possessed complex societies ready to contribute to the great story of human civilization. The next chapter would witness the birth of ideas that would shape not only Europe, but the entire world. Europe's ancient past is a reminder that civilization does not emerge suddenly, but grows through centuries of adaptation, innovation, and cultural exchange. The early foundations were laid, and the continent was ready for the dawn of classical Europe, where philosophy, republics, and empires would rise. The emergence of classical Greece marked one of the most transformative phases in the history of European civilization, bringing forward ideas and innovations that would profoundly shape the continent. Greece's fragmented geography, mountains, valleys, and scattered islands encouraged the rise of independent city-states, each with its own traditions, forms of government, and social structures. This diversity fostered competition, but also encouraged intellectual growth, experimentation, and cultural creativity. Among the Greek city-states, Athens stood out as a center of philosophy, democracy, and artistic expression. The Athenians developed a system in which citizens, though limited to certain groups, participated in governance, debates, and public decision-making. This early form of democracy became one of Europe's most influential political ideas, echoing across centuries of constitutional development. Greek philosophy played a crucial role in shaping European thought. Thinkers such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle asked fundamental questions about reality, ethics, politics, and human nature. Their ideas formed the foundations of Western philosophy, influencing countless generations and helping establish Europe as a center of intellectual tradition. In the arts, the Greeks developed a deep appreciation for harmony, proportion, and realism. Their sculptures captured the human form with unprecedented accuracy, expressing not only beauty, but also emotion and movement. Greek architecture introduced elements like columns, pediments, and symmetrical design that later became standard features of European monumental buildings. Greek literature epics, tragedies, and comedies reflected human struggles, ambitions, and moral dilemmas. Works like the Iliad, Odyssey, and the plays of Sophocles and Euripides became cornerstones of European storytelling, shaping narrative traditions for thousands of years. These stories explored themes of heroism, fate, justice, and the fragile nature of human existence. The Greeks also excelled in mathematics and science. Figures like Pythagoras, Euclid, Archimedes, and Hippocrates pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. Their discoveries laid foundations for geometry, physics, astronomy, and medicine, creating a scientific tradition that Europe would continue to expand upon for centuries. Religion in Greece centered on a pantheon of gods and goddesses, each representing natural forces or human traits. These myths offered explanations for the world's mysteries and connected communities through shared rituals and festivals. Greek mythology became deeply woven into European literature, art, and identity, surviving long after the original worship ended. While Athens focused on democracy and culture, Sparta represented a starkly different model of society. Spartan life emphasized discipline, warfare, and communal values. Their military excellence became legendary, and their strict training systems influenced later European ideas about citizenship, duty, and martial readiness. The contrast between Athens and Sparta symbolized the tension between freedom and order that would continue shaping European history. Greek city-states frequently engaged in conflict, most famously during the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. This long and exhausting struggle weakened the Greek world and reshaped power dynamics, demonstrating how internal rivalries could undermine even the most advanced civilizations. The consequences of this war would echo across the centuries as a cautionary tale in European politics. Macedonia's rise under Philip II and his son Alexander the Great ended the dominance of the Greek city-states. Alexander's conquests stretched from Greece to Egypt and deep into Asia, creating one of the largest empires in ancient history. His campaigns spread Greek culture across vast regions, launching the Hellenistic age that blended Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and Asian traditions. The Hellenistic era brought breakthroughs in science, philosophy, and the arts. Centers like Alexandria became hubs of learning, hosting libraries, observatories, and schools. This blending of cultures created fertile ground for new ideas, many of which found their way into Europe and shaped future developments in literature, science, and political thought. As Greek influence spread, Italy began to emerge as a major center of power. The early Romans were heavily influenced by Greek colonists in southern Italy. From them, the Romans adopted aspects of art, architecture, religion, and education. These Greek foundations would help shape what became one of the most powerful empires in European history. Rome began as a small settlement on the Italian peninsula, but gradually expanded into a complex republic with advanced legal and political institutions. Roman governance introduced systems of representation, written laws, and administrative organization that formed the blueprint for many later European governments. The idea that laws should guide society rather than individual rulers became one of Rome's most enduring contributions. The Roman Republic balanced power between elected officials, assemblies, and the Senate. This model, though imperfect, offered stability for centuries. It allowed Rome to expand through diplomacy, military force, and alliances. Roman citizenship itself became a coveted status that extended gradually to conquered peoples, creating a vast, diverse population connected by law and infrastructure. Rome's military strength was unmatched in the ancient world. Structured legions, disciplined soldiers, advanced tactics, and engineering innovation allowed Rome to conquer territories across Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. Each conquest expanded the Roman world and integrated new cultures into the empire, blending traditions and creating the multicultural foundation of Europe. One of Rome's greatest achievements was its infrastructure. Roman roads connected distant provinces, enabling rapid military movement, trade, and communication. Aqueducts delivered fresh water to cities, baths supported hygiene and social life, and bridges linked territories previously isolated. These engineering feats symbolize the power of organization and long-term planning. Rome's architectural style transformed Europe's cities. The use of concrete, arches, and domes allowed for massive structures such as amphitheaters, forums, and temples. Buildings like the Colosseum and the Pantheon showcased Rome's mastery of engineering and aesthetics, influencing European architecture for millennia. Roman society was highly structured, with clear roles for families, social classes, and political institutions. Roman law governed daily life with remarkable precision. Concepts such as property rights, contracts, inheritance, and legal representation became deeply embedded in European legal culture, surviving in modern legal systems. Cultural exchange flourished throughout the Roman Empire. Latin became the unifying language of the Western provinces, shaping the Romance languages: French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and Romanian. Greek remained dominant in the eastern regions, creating a bilingual intellectual world where ideas could flow freely between scholars. Religion in the Roman world evolved from polytheistic worship to the eventual spread of Christianity. Initially, Romans absorbed gods from conquered peoples, creating a broad pantheon that symbolized the multicultural nature of the empire. Over time, new religious movements emerged, with Christianity eventually becoming the dominant faith of Europe. The rise of Christianity introduced a new moral framework built on compassion, community, and spiritual equality. As Christian teachings spread, they challenged traditional Roman beliefs and eventually reshaped the values of European society. The conversion of Emperor Constantine marked the turning point, establishing Christianity as a powerful force in European development. Despite its achievements, Rome faced internal challenges. Economic inequality, political corruption, border pressures, and military overextension weakened the empire. As the empire struggled to maintain stability, rival factions fought for control, and loyalty among citizens declined. These internal conflicts set the stage for its eventual fragmentation. The division of the Roman Empire into eastern and western halves created two distinct paths for European civilization. The Eastern Empire, centered in Constantinople, remained strong and culturally vibrant, preserving much of the classical heritage. The Western Empire, however, faced mounting pressures from migrations and invasions. Germanic tribes, including the Goths, Vandals, and Franks, moved into Roman territories as the empire weakened. Some sought refuge, others sought conquest. These migrations were not simple invasions, but complex movements of entire peoples seeking land and stability. Their interactions with Rome created new cultural and political landscapes. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century marked the end of ancient Europe and the beginning of the medieval era. But Roman influence did not disappear. Roman laws, language, roads, and Christian institutions survived, shaping the emerging kingdoms of Europe. The legacy of Rome became the backbone of European civilization. The early medieval period saw the rise of Germanic kingdoms across Europe. These kingdoms blended their traditions with Roman customs, creating new cultures. The Franks, under leaders like Clovis, adopted Christianity and began building the foundations of modern France and Germany. This fusion of Roman and Germanic traditions defined medieval Europe. Christianity spread rapidly, becoming the unifying force across the continent. Monasteries preserved ancient knowledge, copied manuscripts, and served as centers of learning. Missionaries converted tribes and kings, bringing literacy, morality, and shared identity to diverse European peoples. The Church became the central institution of European life. The Byzantine Empire flourished in the East, preserving Greco-Roman culture and serving as a bridge between Europe and Asia. Constantinople became a center of trade, art, and scholarship. Byzantine influence extended into Eastern Europe, shaping the cultures of Slavic peoples and contributing to the development of Orthodox Christianity. While the East prospered, the West struggled through economic decline, population loss, and frequent conflict. Yet these challenges did not halt progress entirely. Local communities adapted to new political realities, forming early feudal structures where land and protection shaped social relationships. These feudal foundations would define medieval Europe. Agriculture remained the backbone of European life, but innovations such as the heavy plow, crop rotation, and improved harnesses increased productivity. These developments laid the groundwork for future economic growth and demographic recovery, slowly stabilizing the continent after centuries of turmoil. Viking expansion reshaped northern Europe as seafaring warriors, traders, and settlers traveled across the continent. Their raids struck fear across coastal regions, but their trading networks connected Europe with distant lands. Over time, many Vikings settled, converted to Christianity, and integrated into European society, contributing to cultural diversity. Europe's political landscape gradually evolved with the rise of powerful kingdoms. Charlemagne, king of the Franks, united much of Western Europe and promoted learning, law, and Christian unity. His empire became a symbol of European renewal and influenced later political structures. Though his empire later fragmented, his legacy endured. Medieval Europe saw the growth of towns and markets as trade revived. Merchants, artisans, and guilds formed the basis of urban life. These towns became centers of economic activity, innovation, and cultural exchange. The revival of long-distance trade connected Europe to the Mediterranean, Middle East, and Asia. During this era, Europe rediscovered classical knowledge through contact with the Islamic world. Translations of Greek and Roman texts sparked new intellectual movements, laying the groundwork for the Renaissance. This exchange of ideas demonstrated how interconnected civilizations could shape Europe's destiny. Feudalism remained dominant, but social mobility began to increase. Skilled craftsmen, merchants, and scholars gained influence, contributing to a slow shift in social structures. These changes paved the way for more dynamic forms of governance and economic systems in later centuries. Religion remained central to European identity, influencing law, education, and daily life. Cathedrals, monasteries, and pilgrimage routes became symbols of cultural unity. The Church not only guided spiritual life, but also played a major role in politics and diplomacy, shaping decisions that affected the entire continent. The medieval period also laid the groundwork for Europe's later expansion. Maritime skills improved, navigational knowledge increased, and curiosity about distant lands grew. These early developments would eventually fuel the age of exploration, transforming Europe's role in global history. Europe's internal conflicts, however, remained constant. Rival kingdoms, noble families, and religious authorities frequently clashed. These conflicts slowed progress, but also encouraged political evolution, forcing leaders to seek new forms of governance and alliances. By the end of the early medieval period, Europe had transformed dramatically from its ancient roots. The fusion of Roman, Germanic, Christian, and Byzantine elements created a uniquely European identity. This mixture of cultures, institutions, and innovations set the stage for the High Medieval and Renaissance periods. This era showed that European civilization was not defined by a single culture or people, but by a continuous process of blending, adapting, and evolving. The continent's resilience and diversity would continue to guide its development through the coming centuries. As medieval Europe grew more stable, the next phase of transformation would see the birth of universities, the rise of powerful monarchies, and the expansion of intellectual life. Europe was preparing for another major shift that would carry it closer to its modern identity. With its foundations strengthened by centuries of cultural exchange, conflict, and adaptation, Europe was ready to enter a new age of discovery, learning, and global interaction. This unfolding story would continue to shape the civilization that would dominate the following millennium. The High Middle Ages marked a period of profound transformation in Europe, bringing population growth, economic revival, and the beginnings of centralized states. After centuries of uncertainty, Europe entered an era of relative stability, which allowed culture, knowledge, and society to expand more rapidly than ever before. This period laid essential foundations for the Renaissance, shaping the modern identity of the continent. Agricultural innovations continued to play a central role in Europe's revival. New tools, improved plowing methods, and the spread of three-field crop rotation dramatically increased food production. With more reliable harvests and improved nutrition, populations grew steadily. Larger communities required better organization, more skilled labor, and stronger leadership, strengthening the social fabric of medieval Europe. As villages expanded, urban centers flourished. Towns became magnets for artisans, merchants, and professionals, seeking opportunities beyond traditional rural life. Markets and fairs connected these towns with distant regions, creating trade networks across Europe. With increased economic activity, a new middle class began to emerge, neither nobles nor peasants, but skilled individuals who played a crucial role in shaping Europe's future. Trade routes expanded far beyond Europe. Italian city-states such as Venice, Genoa, and Florence became commercial powerhouses. Their merchants traded with the Byzantine Empire, the Islamic world, and even distant Asian markets. This flow of goods, silk, spices, precious metals, brought wealth and cultural exchange, helping European society become more open, interconnected, and sophisticated. This growth in commerce also encouraged financial innovation. Banking systems developed to support long-distance trade, with Italian families such as the Medici pioneering methods of credit, accounting, and currency exchange. These early banking practices helped lay the foundation for Europe's future capitalist economies and made cities centers of financial power. The rise of universities was one of the most significant developments of the High Middle Ages. Institutions such as Bologna, Paris, and Oxford began as centers of theological study, but gradually expanded to include law, medicine, philosophy, and the sciences. Students from all over Europe gathered in these intellectual hubs, exchanging ideas and shaping the continent's knowledge systems. Scholasticism emerged as Europe's main method of learning, combining Christian theology with logical analysis influenced by ancient Greek philosophy. Thinkers such as Thomas Aquinas bridged faith and reason, helping establish intellectual traditions that guided European thought for centuries. The rediscovery of Aristotle's works, often preserved by Islamic scholars, played a major role in this movement. Art and architecture flourished during the High Middle Ages, especially through the construction of towering Gothic cathedrals. These magnificent buildings, with their pointed arches, stained glass windows, and flying buttresses, symbolized Europe's growing confidence and spiritual devotion. Cathedrals became communal centers, repositories of knowledge, and artistic masterpieces representing the unity of faith and creativity. Christianity remained the dominant force in European identity, and the Church exerted immense influence over politics, education, and morality. The papacy sought to assert its authority across the continent, often clashing with monarchs over issues of power and governance. These struggles helped define the relationship between church and state, a tension that would shape European politics for centuries. Pilgrimage culture grew as Christians traveled to sacred sites such as Rome, Santiago de Compostela, and Jerusalem. These journeys strengthened cultural exchange and spread ideas across regions. Pilgrims shared stories, beliefs, and customs, helping different parts of Europe feel more connected despite linguistic and political barriers. The Crusades represented one of the most dramatic expressions of medieval Europe's religious and military ambitions. Beginning at the end of the 11th century, European armies embarked on campaigns to reclaim Jerusalem and the Holy Land. While these expeditions had religious motivations, they also reflected political desires for power, land, and wealth. The Crusades changed Europe in lasting ways. Contact with the Islamic world during the Crusades introduced Europeans to advanced knowledge in science, medicine, mathematics, and philosophy. Europeans encountered new technologies, agricultural products, and artistic styles, which they gradually adopted and integrated into their own societies. This cultural exchange contributed significantly to the intellectual awakening that would later define the Renaissance. The Crusades also stimulated trade, as merchants supplied armies and took advantage of new routes and markets. Cities like Venice and Genoa prospered enormously, becoming economic giants whose influence extended across the Mediterranean. These shifts in wealth and power helped reshape the political landscape of Europe. The rise of powerful monarchies began in this era. Kings in France, England, and Spain centralized authority by building professional armies, implementing efficient taxation, and limiting the power of feudal nobles. These developments brought greater political stability and laid the groundwork for the nation-states that would dominate European history. In England, the Norman conquest introduced new administrative systems, land reforms, and legal adaptations that profoundly shaped the country's governance. The development of common law and the signing of the Magna Carta established early principles of legal rights and limits on royal power, influencing constitutional traditions across Europe. France, under the Capetian dynasty, gradually strengthened royal authority by consolidating territories and building administrative institutions. Over centuries, French kings transformed a fragmented realm into one of Europe's most powerful kingdoms. This centralization became a model for other European and the Iberian Christian kingdoms continued their long struggle against Muslim-ruled territories in a process known as the Reconquista. This centuries-long conflict reshaped the region's political and culture, ultimately leading to the rise of unified kingdoms such as Castile, Aragon, and eventually Spain. The blending of Christian, Muslim, and Jewish influences during this period made Iberia one of Europe's most diverse cultural landscapes. Meanwhile, in the East, the Byzantine Empire faced pressures from external enemies, internal disputes, and despite its challenges, Byzantium preserved classical knowledge, maintained urban traditions, and influenced Eastern European and Slavic cultures. Its monumental art and architecture left lasting marks on Orthodox Christianity. Slavic states emerged as important players in European politics. In Eastern Europe, kingdoms such as Poland, Hungary, and Bohemia established strong identities and engaged in both cooperation and conflict with neighboring powers. Their cultural development, legal systems, and military traditions added greater complexity to the European landscape. In the far north, the Scandinavian kingdoms transitioned from Viking societies to Christian monarchies. Norway, Sweden, and Denmark built administrative structures, expanded trade networks, and developed distinct cultural identities. Their seafaring heritage continued to shape their economies and interactions with the rest of Europe. The High Middle Ages also saw advances in literature, and vernacular languages gained recognition alongside Latin, allowing writers to produce works in French, English, German, Italian, and other tongues. Epic poems, romances, and moral tales kept contributing to the development of national cultures and shared identities. Troubadours and poets celebrated themes of love, honor, and heroism, influencing European artistic traditions. Their works helped shape social ideals. As literacy spread, more people gained access to written stories. The growing complexity of medieval society brought new challenges. Conflicts between nobles, monarchs, and religious authorities often sparked wars and rebellions. These struggles sometimes caused disruption, but also encouraged political innovation and reform, gradually shaping more stable systems of governance. The expansion of trade and urban life gave rise to guilds, which organized craftsmen and regulated economic activity. Guilds maintained quality standards. They also played important roles in community life, sponsoring festivals, charitable works, and local governance. Despite progress, medieval Europe remained vulnerable to famine, disease, and conflict. The reliance on agriculture meant that poor harvests could lead, yet communities showed remarkable resilience, adapting their strategies and social structures to cope with adversity. Toward the end of the High Middle Ages, Europe experienced unprecedented intellectual energy. Scholars debated philosophical questions, experimented with new technologies, and these developments gradually pushed Europe toward a major cultural shift that would redefine art, science, and society. However, the 14th century brought a series of devastating crises. The Great Famine of 1315, millions suffered from hunger and economic collapse, revealing the fragility of agricultural and administrative methods. Soon afterward, Europe faced the catastrophic Black Death. Beginning in 1347, the plague swept through towns and villages, killing up to 1/3 of the population. The sudden loss of life caused economic turmoil, labor shortages, and profound psychological shock. Yet the aftermath of the plague also led to major social changes, including improved wages, greater mobility for workers, and new attitudes toward life. The plague also transformed religious life. Many people questioned traditional beliefs, sought personal connections with faith, or turned to new forms of spiritual expression. These tensions would eventually contribute to the major religious upheavals of the following centuries. The 100 Years' War between England and France reshaped national identities and transformed military tactics. The introduction of longbows, gunpowder weapons, and professional armies signaled the end of medieval warfare and the beginning of more modern military systems. Joan of Arc emerged as a symbolic leader during this war, rallying French forces and inspiring renewed hope. Her legacy demonstrated how individual passion and belief could influence the course of European history, even in times of widespread despair and conflict. Meanwhile, the rise of strong monarchies continued. Kings consolidated power, developed bureaucratic administrations, and relied increasingly on professional soldiers rather than feudal levies. These changes laid the foundation for early modern states with clearer borders, centralized authority, and growing political ambition. Social mobility increased as labor shortages forced nobles to grant more freedom to peasants. Many rural inhabitants moved to cities in search of opportunity, contributing to urban growth. This shift helped weaken feudalism and gave rise to a society more receptive to innovation, trade, and cultural expression. The late medieval era saw important developments in technology. The invention of mechanical clocks improved timekeeping, transforming daily life and encouraging greater discipline and productivity. Advances in metalwork, shipbuilding, and navigation hinted at Europe's future global expansion. One of the most transformative inventions of the era was the printing press, created by Johannes Gutenberg in the mid-15th century. Printing revolutionized communication by making books cheaper, more accessible, and more widely distributed. Knowledge spread rapidly, enabling ideas to reach across social classes and geographic boundaries. The printing press fueled intellectual debate and inspired new movements in science, literature, and politics. It made it possible for scholars to share discoveries quickly, accelerating the pace of learning. This technological shift helped Europe enter a new era of innovation and cultural revival. As the medieval period drew to a close, Europe faced both the weight of its past and the promise of a new future. Centuries of cultural blending, conflict, and adaptation had created a continent rich with diversity and potential. The stage was set for dramatic changes that would reshape Europe's role in the world. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 marked a symbolic end to the medieval era. With the Byzantine Empire gone, many Greek scholars fled to Western Europe, bringing ancient manuscripts and intellectual traditions. Their arrival reignited interest in classical philosophy, science, and art, inspiring a cultural rebirth. This rebirth, known as the Renaissance, would transform Europe's understanding of humanity, nature, and the universe. It would spark a revolution in art, science, literature, and exploration, leading Europe out of its medieval constraints and into a new age of global influence. The medieval foundations, its institutions, struggles, innovations, and cultural exchanges were essential in making this transformation possible. Europe, having survived famine, war, and plague, entered the next phase of its history with newfound confidence and intellectual energy. The coming centuries would see Europe explore the globe, redefine its political structures, and shape ideas that continue to influence modern civilization. The continent was now prepared to take on a central role in world history, driven by creativity, ambition, and a hunger for knowledge. European civilization entered the modern era carrying the memory of centuries of transformation. And as the 19th century opened, it revealed a continent overflowing with ambition, invention, and profound social shifts that reshaped the way Europeans viewed themselves and the world around them. The Industrial Revolution, which had begun in Britain, now spread across the continent with a force that rivaled the great migrations and conquests of earlier centuries, drawing people from rural towns into massive industrial centers filled with steam engines, ironworks, textile mills, and urban expansion on a scale never before imagined. The rise of industry fueled population growth, urbanization, and a new class system that challenged the old feudal and aristocratic hierarchies, creating factory workers, financiers, and industrial entrepreneurs whose power often eclipsed the traditional nobility, while at the same time prompting intense debates over labor rights, working conditions, and the human cost of economic progress. Steam power transformed transportation as locomotives cut across Europe and iron ships commanded the seas, shrinking distances and accelerating the movement of goods, ideas, and people, which in turn strengthened colonial expansion as European nations extended their influence deeper into Asia, Africa, and the Pacific in search of resources and markets. Nationalism surged as people identified increasingly with unified cultural identities rather than local regions or dynastic rulers, culminating in the unification of Italy and Germany, two political transformations that dramatically altered the balance of power in Europe and reshaped its geopolitical landscape. The intellectual atmosphere of Europe during this time was equally intense, as philosophers, scientists, writers, and artists debated everything from democratic ideals to religious authority, developing theories that questioned old traditions and celebrated rational thought, scientific discovery, and human potential in ways that echoed the earlier Enlightenment but carried a distinctly modern urgency. At the same time, Europe's growing sense of superiority and destiny fueled imperial conquests that had devastating consequences for many non-European societies. Even as Europeans justified these expansions through ideologies that claimed cultural, racial, and technological dominance, revealing a darker side of the civilizational confidence that defined the era. The late 19th century produced remarkable scientific breakthroughs, from Darwin's theory of evolution to advances in medicine, chemistry, and physics, setting the stage for an explosion of new technologies, but also sparking intense social and religious controversies as traditional beliefs clashed with modern science. Urban life changed drastically with the introduction of electricity, modern sewage systems, public transportation, photography, telegraph communication, and the rise of mass consumer culture, which for many Europeans created a sense of optimism, possibility, and constant acceleration. Yet beneath the progress lay anxieties about inequality, overcrowding, political instability, and the growing tensions between the great powers of Europe, tensions that would soon erupt into events far more destructive than anything the continent had faced since the collapse of ancient empires. The early 20th century brought the continent to the brink as competing alliances. Imperial rivalries and nationalist passions set the stage for the First World War, a conflict that shattered Europe's sense of invulnerability and exposed the devastating capabilities of modern industrial warfare. Machine guns, tanks, poison gas, and trench warfare turned the landscapes of Europe into terrifying battlegrounds, destroying generations of young men, crippling economies, and leaving millions traumatized, while collapsing empires like Austria-Hungary, Russia, and the Ottoman Empire reshaping the political map of the world. After the war, Europe attempted to rebuild itself through new political experiments, including democratic republics and socialist movements. But the rise of fascism and communism created ideological divisions that deepened economic and social turmoil, particularly during the worldwide depression that struck in the 1930s. In Germany, Italy, and parts of Eastern Europe, totalitarian governments took hold, promising order and national revival, but ultimately driving the continent toward the most destructive conflict in human history. As the Second World War unleashed unprecedented violence, genocide, technological warfare, and civilian suffering. The Nazi regime's invasion of multiple countries, the Holocaust, and the spread of warfare across nearly every corner of Europe created a crisis that pushed European civilization to the edge of collapse, raising profound questions about morality, identity, and the future of the continent. When the war ended in 1945, Europe was left devastated, with ruined cities, broken economies, and millions of displaced people, but also with a renewed determination to rebuild and to prevent such destruction from ever occurring again. The post-war era saw the beginning of a unique and transformative process: European integration, as former enemies sought cooperation through economic and political unions, gradually leading to the formation of institutions like the European Coal and Steel Community, and later the European Economic Community, which eventually evolved into the European Union. The Cold War divided Europe into two ideological blocs: Western Europe aligned with democratic and capitalist systems, while Eastern Europe fell under Soviet influence, resulting in decades of political tension, espionage, and military standoffs that shaped European identity and global diplomacy. Life in Western Europe gradually improved through economic recovery programs, technological innovation, consumer growth, and strengthened democratic institutions, while Eastern Europe experienced state-controlled economies, political repression, and limited freedoms under communist regimes. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, cultural revolutions swept across the continent as youth movements, feminist groups, and civil rights activism challenged social norms, sparking transformations in art, music, education, and politics that redefined European culture for generations. The collapse of the Soviet Union and the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 marked a turning point in European civilization, opening the way for reunification of Germany, democratization of Eastern Europe, and the expansion of the European Union into former communist states. This period also marked the rise of globalization as Europe embraced interconnected markets, digital technology, international labor flows, and cultural exchange, reshaping the continent's identity in ways that blended traditional heritage with modern influences from around the world. European cities evolved into centers of innovation, finance, fashion, technology, and culture, while debates about immigration, economic inequality, national identity, and political sovereignty increasingly influenced public life and policy across the continent. The early 21st century introduced new challenges, from economic crises to debates about EU integration, from terrorism to the pressures of migration, and from political polarization to concerns about climate change, but also showcased Europe's continued resilience and commitment to democracy, human rights, and multiculturalism. As the continent faced the digital revolution, Europeans adapted to a world shaped by artificial intelligence, global communication networks, and rapidly changing economic structures, reinventing industries, rethinking labor markets, and exploring new forms of artistic and scientific expression. Modern Europeans continue to grapple with the legacy of their civilization, reflecting on the triumphs of cultural achievements, scientific discoveries, and democratic progress, while also confronting the painful memories of war, colonialism, and internal conflict that have shaped their shared history. The diverse languages, traditions, and identities within Europe remain both a source of strength and a reminder of the continent's complex past, highlighting how unity and diversity coexist in a region whose history has been marked by both cooperation and competition. European philosophy, literature, art, and music continue to influence global culture, just as they have for centuries, while universities, research institutions, and cultural centers serve as reminders of the continent's enduring intellectual legacy. Architecture throughout Europe reflects this long journey from ancient Roman ruins to medieval cathedrals, from Renaissance palaces to modern skyscrapers, offering physical testimony to the evolving story of a civilization that has constantly rebuilt and reimagined itself. The continent's landscapes, from the fjords of Scandinavia to the vineyards of France, from the Mediterranean coastlines to the forests of Central Europe, shape not only its natural beauty, but also its cultural memory, as generations have drawn inspiration from the environment around them. Religion continues to play an important role in European identity, with Christianity serving as a historical foundation. Yet modern Europe has grown increasingly secular and diverse, welcoming varied beliefs that contribute to its pluralistic character. European cuisine, with its regional specializations, has become a global phenomenon, connecting tradition and innovation in ways that reflect the continent's long history of cultural exchange, trade, and migration. Sports, particularly football, have evolved into powerful cultural symbols that unite millions of Europeans across national boundaries, providing a shared sense of excitement, pride, and identity. As Europe navigates the complexities of the present, it carries with it a deep historical consciousness, knowing that its modern achievements are built on foundations laid by countless generations, from ancient settlers to medieval scholars, from imperial explorers to industrial workers. The story of European civilization is not a straight line of progress, but a tapestry woven from moments of brilliance and darkness, unity and division, war and peace, invention and destruction, each shaping the destiny of the continent in profound ways. The continent's resilience lies in its ability to learn from the past, adapt to change, and reinvent itself through cooperation, innovation, and cultural exchange, reflecting a civilizational spirit that has endured for thousands of years. Modern Europe remains deeply connected to its ancient roots, its Greek philosophy, Roman law, Celtic traditions, and Germanic cultures, while also embracing global influences that continuously reshape its identity. Throughout its history, Europe has produced thinkers who redefined knowledge, explorers who expanded horizons, artists who transformed expression, and citizens who fought for rights that inspire movements around the world. The continent's political systems, ranging from parliamentary democracies to constitutional monarchies, reflect centuries of experimentation, negotiation, and reform, shaping models of governance admired across the globe. European science and technology continue to advance fields like medicine, engineering, climate research, and aerospace, building on traditions that stretch back to Renaissance polymaths and Enlightenment scholars. Cultural festivals, historical monuments, and preserved heritage sites connect modern Europeans to the achievements and struggles of their ancestors, reminding them of the shared legacy that binds the continent together. Education in Europe places significant emphasis on history, literature, and philosophy, encouraging new generations to understand not only their cultural roots, but also the global impact of European civilization. As the continent faces economic, environmental, and political challenges, many Europeans look to the cooperative institutions built after World War II as a guiding framework for maintaining peace and addressing common problems. Migration continues to reshape European society, introducing diverse cultures, languages, and perspectives that contribute to the continent's evolving identity, even as they prompt debates about integration, belonging, and national values. The digital age has connected Europeans across borders more than ever before, enabling rapid communication, cross-border collaboration, and access to shared cultural content that strengthens a sense of continental unity. Yet even in this interconnected world, regional identities remain strong, with many communities preserving languages, traditions, and customs that have survived centuries of change, enriching the cultural mosaic of modern Europe. The balance between preserving tradition and embracing innovation remains at the heart of the European experience, shaping debates about everything from architecture to education, from technology to political reform. Throughout all these transformations, Europeans have shown an enduring commitment to human rights, cultural expression, and intellectual inquiry, qualities that have defined their civilization since antiquity. The continent's historical journey demonstrates that progress is never guaranteed, but must be continuously earned through resilience, cooperation, and the shared pursuit of knowledge, justice, and peace. As the future unfolds, Europe stands as a civilization that has faced countless trials and emerged stronger each time, ready to confront new challenges, while carrying with it the wisdom and memory of some of the most influential moments in human history. The legacy of European civilization is not confined to museums, ancient ruins, or history books. It lives in the languages spoken, the values upheld, the art created, the freedoms protected, and the enduring curiosity that drives Europeans to explore, question, and innovate. From the earliest prehistoric settlements to the complexities of the digital world, Europe's story reflects the triumphs and struggles of humanity itself, offering lessons, inspiration, and caution for generations yet to come. In its enduring mixture of cultures, traditions, and ideas, Europe continues to shape global civilization, contributing perspectives that reflect both the weight of history and the possibilities of the future. The continent's diverse peoples connected by roads, ideas, and centuries of shared experience carry forward a civilization that continues to evolve, redefine itself, and influence the world in ways both subtle and profound. European civilization remains a living narrative, one that stretches across millennia and continues to grow with each new generation, weaving together past, present, and future in a story that is far from finished. Even as Europe changes, the threads of its history remain visible, reminding all who study it that civilizations are built not only through monuments and conquests, but through ideas, creativity, resilience, and the ongoing human desire to seek meaning and understanding. And so, the long and intricate journey of European civilization moves forward, shaped by those who remember its past and those who imagine its future, standing as one of the most influential, complex, and enduring stories in the history of the world.